You guys hear me out there okay? Yes? Excellent. What? What? Thank you all for being here. Happy November. Thanksgiving's coming up, so hopefully everybody has plans for the holidays that are the plans you want to be for the holidays. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier saying that's not my meal, it's not my favorite thing, but happy to be with family and friends as we go through the holidays. So thank you all for being here. We've got a little bit of a conversation going on this evening. We're going to have something special. We're going to have a little announcement, and we're going to do some voting. So get excited about that. First off, a thank you to our sponsors. I don't believe any of our sponsors are here tonight, but Barracuda and Polera both are foundational sponsors for us and very critical to the support of the organization. So we appreciate them, and we would appreciate it if you take a couple minutes and go out and check out their websites and talk to them if you need. This is the 2025 board. You hear me say this almost every single month, but it takes all of the volunteers here to make this organization run. So a round of applause, please, for the board of directors. If you're on the board, could you raise your hand, please? On the board? All right, thank you. Really appreciate that. We've got some changes. We're coming up on the end of the year. For those of you that have been with us for a number of years, you probably recognize this pattern that we have. So at about this time of year, we've decided, if you recall a couple months ago, we asked for volunteers to join the board, and we had several different people approach us and do that. We had a couple of members that are going to roll off the board. So please, a round of applause for Suzanne and Frank, who will be leaving the board. They're not done with their duties until the end of the year, though. So just let's be clear. And we will roast them when we get the chance in December. So think up your good stories for both of them. We'll have an opportunity for that. So I want to introduce the 2026 board. Chris Zarate, you're here this evening. Hi, Chris. He's going to be joining us as a vice president, taking over Suzanne's place. And then Angelique Mott, who is not able to make it tonight, will be taking over the social media place that Becky's in today. And we're going to play musical chairs a little bit. Becky's going to move to membership, and Manisha's going to move to secretary. So we're going to move a couple of different roles around. As a board, it's been great. As the president of the board, it's been fantastic. The board members are great in terms of giving feedback, and I think we have a really good, open, honest communication about where people want to be, and that really helps. And I think that shows up here with the energy. I think it's all part of the AITP experience. So we do have to vote them in, and so what we're going to do today is we're going to do a voice vote. It's a yay or nay, all or none. And what we'll do is, assuming the vote goes through positively, we'll do the swearing in next month. So we'll line everybody up, and then I think Frank is going to swear us in this year. So let's take a vote. All in favor of the board as presented, being the 2026 board, say aye. 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 Any nays? All right. That's right. So we'll note. I can't quite hear everything going on out there. If you object, you volunteer. That's right. That's right. So this board, we'll sign the board in December, and they'll take their responsibilities starting in January. So thank you all. We appreciate that. I also want to thank the advisory committee, the management advisory committee. We call it the MAC. And we have several MAC members here tonight. If you could raise your hand if you're a MAC member. Thank you. And I think this is one of the special things about AITP is we do have this MAC. It's an advisory committee that does help the board of directors. We meet with them twice a year, and they help us really be thinking about the future, and they challenge us. And we present ideas to them and get really good, solid feedback. So it's a very beneficial part of AITP. I'm going to slide through a lot of the rest of these slides pretty quickly. They've been running for the last couple of, for the last hour or so. Most of them you've seen before. I do know we have a lot of new members here, or a lot of new faces tonight. So if you're new and you've never been here before, just if you could raise your hand if you're comfortable with that. Excellent. Thank you. Wow. That is fantastic. And I think there's been a ton of referrals. James, where are you? James was telling me earlier tonight that he's on his 4th referral to AITP. So he's going to have a free membership for a year as he continues on this thing. So those of you that are new, welcome. We're really glad to have you here today. If you're interested in staying with AITP, there's several different channels. You can stay as a guest and continue to come as a guest. We also have 3-month or quarterly memberships if you're interested in that. Or obviously the annual membership. We incentivize you to go for the annual, obviously with the financials, but you're welcome to participate in whatever way works best for you. You can contact Manish or email to membership@AITP, or just sign up online. It's the QR code. I'm trying to stay out of the way of the projector. We have some new members, Daniel, Leela, and Lou. How are you all? Thank you. Great to have new members. Lewis and I had a whole conversation. I think you beat me to the coffee, so I couldn't treat you to a coffee. So it's not like I actually, bribed you to come and be part of the member, but it was close, right? We do have ambassadors for those new folks. This is really important, whether you're new and just visiting or whether you're new and a member. We do have 3 ambassadors. They all have stars on their name tags. All 3 are actually here tonight. So if you guys could just quickly raise your hand. The ambassadors are here to help because the board members are quite often busy with these events, checking people in, making sure we have food, doing all of those types of things. So for new people, we want to make it as comfortable as an experience as possible. The ambassadors are here to help answer questions, point you in the right direction, those types of things. So we appreciate all of the work that they do. We do have a referral program. I mentioned this earlier with James, who's taking full advantage of this. Basically, the members are the lifeblood of this organization. It is the secret sauce, and the networking that happens here is because of all of you and because you bring new people in that will benefit and participate in our community. And so we've created this referral program. It works really simply. If you're an annual member, you make a referral, send a note into membership, and if the referred member becomes an annual member, then the referrer gets 2 months added to their membership, and the referee gets an extra month to theirs. So everybody benefits, the club benefits, members benefit. So we really encourage people to take advantage of that, and it's as simple as an email and then following up sometimes to make sure that both sides of the equation happen. So encourage people to take advantage of that. Another member benefit that we had some questions on recently, so I wanted to put the slide back up, is you can gift your membership. So it's fairly straightforward. You basically sign in like you normally would when you're registering for an event. And in that next box, instead of putting your email address in, put in the person that you want to gift your membership to. That's great. If you can't make an event, you can still get the full value of your membership. So think about your coworkers and others like that. If you can't make it, send them. Send your wife, your husband, your spouse, whoever you think would benefit from it. It's a great way to make sure you maximize the value of your membership. We have Group 5. This hasn't changed in a while. Basically, this is really flexible. We have 2 different programs, one aimed at companies and one aimed at higher education. There's a coordinator in that organization, and then they can choose 4 different people every single month. Those 4 people can change. They can be different. So some organizations use it for benefits. Some organizations use it as sort of a congratulatory. They use it for training purposes. There's lots of different reasons to do that. We have several different groups here. In fact, we've got a couple of people from NC State. Again, this is only the 2nd month for those folks. NC State, great to see that. We'll look back. Sponsorship, as we mentioned earlier, we have 2 corporate foundational level sponsorships. We have several different levels here. If you're an organization and you can help us through sponsorship, please contact us. Jen's not able to make it today, but you can send an email to Jen at sponsorship@AITP-RTP.org. The Social Plus allows us, frankly, to just buy beer. We like that a lot, particularly if we go off-site. The December events coming up, we would love to have some help offsetting the cost for that. chapter and foundational get a little bit more detailed. You get more benefits for that type of training, and obviously a sustaining sponsorship is a pretty significant commitment on both of our parts as well. So if you've got questions on any of those, please contact any of the board members, but particularly Jen. And then a little foreshadowing of what's coming. December, we have the holiday special. It will be here. Sign up early, please. It is open for registration. You can register. You can scan the QR code right now and go right to registration and take care of that. We are planning on an ugly sweater contest. So now is the time. Start shopping. Look for your ugly sweater. We have not figured out how we're going to judge that yet. AI will probably solve our problem. But come with your ugliest sweater possible. Or you can buck the trend and come dressed dashingly, whatever works. But if you do that, we'll probably choose the ugliest here, so just be careful. January, Heather is going to be talking about enterprise cloud transformation. February, Abel is going to be talking to us about transferring some of the soft skills that they are taught in the military into civilian practices. And in March, we have our annual Women in Technology panel. We'll probably firm up the panel in December is our goal right now. So by the November meeting, we should have more details about who's attending and the topics and other things like that.
Fundraiser.
Yeah. Fundraiser. Oh yeah, December. Thank you. Yes. You want to talk about that quickly, Becky?
I would love
quickly.
to. Yes, quickly. Okay, so something new for December. We are doing a fundraiser for a place at the table in downtown Raleigh. We're going to have a QR code where you can donate while we're here, and they are a very great charity. It is a pay what you can or work it off restaurant in downtown Raleigh. They are wonderful. Look them up if you haven't seen it or been there before, but we will have more details and we'll post on LinkedIn ahead of time, but we're going to be doing that while we are doing the party in December.
Great, thank you, Becky. Becky's done all of the organizing for that as well. So thank you, Becky, for taking the lead on all that. And we're actually building out our schedule through the middle of next year, which is fantastic. It's fairly new for us this year to have it running almost 6 months in advance. So we'll have these up on the website shortly. And as we finalize into April and May, we'll get those posted. We do know already that June is going to be the joint adventure. It is an adventure. Joint event with SIM and T-Tech. We're going to do that at CECC like we did last year. We've got the space reserved already for that date. That was a great event last year, so just a heads up on that.
You said that really fast. No one's ever been. What is that place?
That place is a very cool venue. It's Carolina Exotic Car Club. So we're actually in this really neat, architecturally interesting space with these Ferraris and Lambos and other things all around us. Airplanes hanging from the ceilings. It's really kind of a neat, special place. Great for networking. It'll be a networking-only event, but it should be pretty exciting. So more to come on all of that. And with that, I'd like to invite Shane to come up. We're going to take a couple of seconds to swap computers over. Most of you have seen Shane's bio. For me, this was really fascinating just because Deming, for me, when I did my grad school work in business administration, it was Deming was a big part of that. And so hearing what Shane's got to say about that from his perspective should be quite interesting. Thanks, Shane.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Yeah, I'm on. I got a green dot. Awesome. And then would you hit the lights? Awesome. Yes, mood lighting. I figured Jerome would like that. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Shane Parreco. I just wanted to say thanks to the board and to Jerome and Brooke and Kate and everyone bringing me here. I live up in Asheville, and so it's a real pleasure to come down and see so many folks talking about IT and all the ways that impacts the world, especially these days. It's always good to go somewhere and hear lots of folks talking about AI and how AI and IT connect those dots. I'm here tonight to talk about Deming and his legacy and what my perspective is on his impact on business in general, but obviously with its connection to IT management and really like the more human side of things. So just a little bit about me. I am a tech startup founder. I live in Asheville, so I drove down from the mountain today to be with you guys this evening. It was not a bad drive. Everybody's like, oh gosh, that's so far. And I'm like, I'm kind of used to it. Living in Asheville, you pretty much have to drive everywhere, but everywhere is about the same distance. It's like 3 hours there and 3.5 hours there, or 2.5 hours there. So not bad at all. I started a business called Actiga. Our product is Agenda Keeper. I'm happy to talk more about that. That product is in beta, but the Actiga organization, we're more of a custom software development, design and development agency based in Asheville, and most of our people are local in Asheville, trying to support the development of the tech ecosystem in Western North Carolina. So that's really our focus. My background is, my undergrad was in organizational leadership. That's how I got exposed to Deming and his principles of management and statistical process and Six Sigma and quality control and all of these things. I graduated from Brevard in 2004. I'm currently completing an MBA in leadership, also through Brevard. They have a new online MBA program that I'm almost done with my first semester, so yay for that. I actually started running my own carpentry business, and my path has definitely been a winding one. Went from carpentry into paragliding. If you're interested in ultralight aviation, I could talk about that all night as well. And that led me to creating an online learning platform for ultralight aviation students. And I did that back in 2018 and created an online education business around that platform and started building other platforms. And then the pandemic hit, and then everybody was worried about online learning. And so that business really kind of took all of my focus, and started Actiga in March of 2023 with a focus on product. We're thinking about 3D and XR and VR on the web. And so we authored a white paper, XRWD. It's xrwd.org if you're interested in that. But ultimately led us to deciding to focus more on a productivity application that we felt like was more impactful. Trying to do something that cutting edge, thinking about XR and VR, and being in Asheville, kind of on a tech island, was really difficult to find people who understood what we were talking about. And then with the hurricane, it really kind of forced our hand to pivot our focus. And the Agenda Keeper really became the product that we have the most excitement about. But our business model shifted more into custom design and development as an agency. And so that's really kind of more of the story. But obviously, I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about Deming. And so I am definitely a self-proclaimed advocate for Deming in the workplace. I see the impact that his principles of management have on my team and our process. And I'm constantly kind of spreading the news and sharing this, some of these interesting pieces of what he taught with folks. And most of the people who I've met that know who Ed Deming was and are familiar with his work are not familiar with this particular piece of what he taught. So that's part of what's fun for me, is I feel like even when I'm presenting and talking about Deming and his principles and his philosophy, there's almost always folks that are surprised and they're learning something new. So I'm hoping that this will be educational and fun for you guys all tonight. So who was Ed Deming? Who in here knows who Ed Deming was? Okay, we've got a handful. I like that. That's rare. I hardly ever see that many hands go up when I ask that question, so that's super helpful. He was born in 1900, died in 1993. He was a statistician and a management theorist. He was most impactful in his work. He was hired by the US government to go to post-World War II Japan to aid in the development of better quality control systems for manufacturing. The Army was having a hard time getting parts manufactured well. And so they asked Deming to go over there and engage with the Japanese leadership and the manufacturers of in the regions that were working with the Army, to say, hey, we need to get the quality improved. And that very much led to the development of the Toyota production system, the Kaizen system, if anyone is familiar with that. That was directly related to Deming's work. Really fascinating. His continuous improvement model is what gave birth to Six Sigma and that whole concept of quality control. Some of you might know who Charles Schuhart was. Deming worked with Schuhart. They came up with the red bead experiment to demonstrate variation within a system. And that's really what led to quality control, understanding variation in manufacturing. He also authored the 14 Points for Management, and that's where a lot of the quotes that you'll see come from when you see Deming stuff. You know, there is the Deming Institute, and they're constantly in my LinkedIn feed, you know, posting pictures of Deming and quotes from his 14 Points of Management. So those are some of the more philosophical sides, the human side of Deming's teachings. And his system of profound knowledge was one of the pieces of his teachings that landed on me in a profound way. And specifically, this concept of the willing worker. So the willing worker and how that connects to this idea of taking pride in your work or finding joy in what you do. And that's really what I'm here to talk about tonight, is joy in our work. So why does Ed Deming matter? As an advocate for continuous improvement and pride in workmanship, I think he matters. I think his legacy and the fact that there's an institute named after him and that there's this whole community of people who are dedicated to what he taught and how to continually renew how it applies to our work as leaders, as business owners, as founders, as managers, regardless of our industry. His system of profound knowledge helps expose what motivates people and why they work. That was one of the things that I thought was the most impressive about what I was learning when I was studying Deming and his principles of management. And one of my favorite quotes from Deming is, "Management's job is to remove barriers to joy in work." And that's not exactly the paradigm that he existed in corporate America in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and early 90s. The whole concept of management being responsible for enabling an environment for people to enjoy their work and have fun was very foreign and is still, unfortunately, very foreign in the world of corporate business. That's something I want to see change. He's got 2 incredible books, Out of the Crisis and The New Economics. Highly recommend those if you're not familiar with them or if you haven't read them. Out of the Crisis is a little bit beefier, and there's a lot more information in there. The New Economics is an easier read. And one of the pieces that I always loved was in the title, is it's not just the New Economics, but it's the New Economics for industry, government, and education. And so much of his philosophy touches all of these things. My professor that was teaching me this and familiarizing me and my cohort with Deming's principles was applying them in the way that he was teaching us. So he was actually seeing the benefit in how Deming's principles play out in an educational model. He didn't believe in grades, so which was very interesting to be at college and not necessarily be getting a grade. He believed, my professor knew Ed Deming personally and believed that the educational model fails most students because we're basically creating students that can pass tests and can't necessarily demonstrate functional knowledge. And so the way that my professor did all of his tests and exams was a one-on-one conversation. And if you could explain the concept, then you got a passing grade. If you could not explain the concept and not carry on a sensible conversation about the topic, then you failed. And that was it. It was a pass-fail deal. And you don't see that a lot in today's education. I'm really interested in systems and the way that they impact government, especially with the way that the world is going these days, but that's for another day. One of the things that I loved also about what he said is innovation comes from people who take joy in their work. The true innovators are the ones that are having the most fun. That's one of the things that Deming always talked about in his presentations, in his books. It's a little less obvious because so much more of his teachings touch like process and quality control and statistical analysis and all of these elements of Six Sigma. And unfortunately, rarely do we see quotes that are more about joy and about enjoying your work and taking pride in your work. The problem in modern IT that, from my perspective, and I'm actually really curious how this might land and resonate with all of you, is like today and now more than ever is burnout and turnover and like just the job market and how hard it is to find work. Tool overload and how many different tools there are. I feel like every day almost I'm meeting someone who's telling me about a new tool that I'd never heard of before, and they're like, oh yeah, it's been around for years. Or now even with AI, there's just tools upon tools upon tools that are kind of flooding our everyday. Process fatigue, AI and its impact on everything these days. So like on the workforce and on productivity, on expectations, on leadership and their expectations of their people, which I think is really dangerous. And ultimately, engineers feel disconnected from their purpose. And I think that's one of the things that I talk about with my team often, is how important it is that they understand the context in which that they're working and how their work benefits all of us that are working for my team. And when you don't have fun and you have no joy in your work, you are ultimately not productive, or you're extremely low on the productivity scale. One of the biggest pieces of what Deming talked about was productivity and what makes an organization productive. And almost always it's the system. He talks more about the system, and it's not about the people, it's about the system. We don't lack tools or data. We lack systems that nurture people. And I think that's one of the really critical pieces of what Deming was trying to get across in his writings and in his teachings, because he would speak and present and try to teach this stuff often, right up until he died. I mean, he was being wheeled up onto stage to give presentations in a wheelchair in his last months of life, still motivated and dedicated to try to get this message out there, that it's all about the people in the process. So the problem is the system. The problem is not the people. 94%, this is another one of his quotes, 94% of problems belong to the system. It's not the person's fault, it's the system that they're working within. And blame fixes nothing. I think common management practice is to find the source of the problem so that they can assign blame. And that doesn't fix anything. There's no solution. It's not a solution-focused approach. And improvement always requires systems thinking. So the system of profound knowledge and just this idea of systems theory, the more that I got familiar with the idea of systems theory and was able to see systems within systems within systems, the more obvious it was when there was a problem. It was like, oh, well, here's the kink. It's in this system. It's in this system, and there's no ease of communication with this system over here. And so true leadership means improving the systems that people work within. And so for me as a founder of a business, and I have a team of 12 now, which I'm really excited about. We just got to our 12th person last month. Yeah, thank you for that. Making sure that those folks understand that I'm taking an intentional approach to crafting a system in which they can thrive. Making sure that they know that it's my responsibility that if they're not having fun or they're not enjoying their work, now it is work, so it's not always going to be fun. I get that. And that's kind of one of the asterisks or caveats. But if it's consistent and someone is not enjoying what they're doing, that's my problem. And I have to figure out how to fix that. Whether that's, do you want to learn something else? Okay, let's get you into a training program. Do you want to switch roles, or do you want to spend time in a different part of our business? Cool, let's get you in there so that you can find that joy and find that fun in your work. Because when people are enjoying their work, their productivity just goes off the charts. It's pretty incredible. So really the solution here, from my perspective, and this is what we're here to talk about tonight, is bringing joy back into the workplace. And how do we do that? Joy drives quality, productivity, and performance through 4 kind of key areas. This is not scientific. This isn't specifically directly derived from Deming's work. This is more kind of my perspective. But I feel like it's 4 things. It's purpose. People have to know why they're doing what they're doing. They have to understand like context. They have to have autonomy. If they're being micromanaged, they're always going to struggle, and they're never going to want to work like above and beyond. They're not going to want to put in that extra hour or that extra 30 minutes and say, man, I'm almost done with this. I could go home right now, but I'm not gonna, because I'm gonna stay focused, and I'm gonna finish this. They have to have opportunities for growth. That's one of the things that Deming talked about in most of his writings, is this idea of continuous improvement and continuous learning. And so people have to, once we know something, we start to feel like, okay, well, I know that. What excites me and what I think excites people is when they're learning new things, when they're presented with new challenges, they have to solve those things, they have to learn something new to solve them. That's where real growth comes from. And they have to feel connected. And that's the part of management's responsibility, to make sure that people get some of all four of these things. They have to understand some purpose. They have to understand their context. They have to have some autonomy. They have to have opportunities for growth. And they have to feel connected to the larger team or the larger system or the larger organization, even if that's just feeling connected to the client that they're working with. Give the engineer an opportunity to sit in on a client meeting. That can be scary because engineers aren't necessarily the best client managers. But I can tell you from my experience that putting an engineer in a client meeting was one of the best things that I ever did for our engineering team, because then they get to ask questions. The client feels like they're being heard, and then the engineer leaves the meeting with the context that they need to continue being productive. So Deming in IT today, we're talking about purpose. I feel like that really connects to this idea of continuous integration and continuous improvement. So how we evolve and how we communicate has to constantly iterate and evolve. It's just like, I talk about this with my team, and I also talk about it with our clients. Like, your product is going to iterate, our process is going to iterate, how we communicate with you is going to change and evolve over time. Everything has to improve and everything has to continually evolve. And for me, that helps provide some context for purpose. It's like, hey, we're here to help. And the way that we help is by working together and by evolving together and by iterating together. Providing people with autonomy. So support and retrospectives. Everybody loves a good retro. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with retros. And this concept of Kaizen, this is directly from the Toyota Motor folks. Autonomy gets better the more opportunities people have to learn from what they did. This really ties into growth as well. But autonomy and growth, I feel like, are deeply interconnected. It's this idea of, okay, how did we do it last time? What did we do well? What did we do poorly? Where could we have done things differently? And how might we do things differently next time? To me, that's like real iteration. That's real process improvement. That's real growth. That's real autonomy. So beyond retrospectives and support, we're talking about development opportunities. So never stop learning. That's one of Deming's quotes as well. Never stop learning. So no matter what you're doing, and for me, it feels even more pertinent because I feel like I'm always learning. And especially today in the world of IT, there's always something new to learn about. And especially with AI and all of the AI tools that are coming out, there's always something new to learn about or some new application of AI. I have a tendency to be like early and excited about AI applications and also extremely cautious and fearful of them. So I'm like the first one to try it and then the first one to be like, I'm not going to use that one. Because it sometimes feels like people are just plugging AI in for the sake of plugging AI in. Then where's the real benefit and where's the risk and how much hallucination risk are we introducing into something that maybe would be really detrimental with hallucination? But the exciting part for me is how much new stuff is happening right now. So there's always more to find out about. There's always more to learn about. There's always more to learn and to put your hands on and interact with. I mean, I remember a couple years ago when like the first vibe coding products were hitting the market, V0 and Replit and a few others. And, I was immediately like on the wait list and ready to put my hands on it. As soon as I use it, I was like, this is garbage. But then like fast forward 2 years and I come back to it and I'm like, wow, this is amazing how much these tools have improved and changed. And I'm seeing real value and benefit in multiple areas of our work. AI as a coding tool, I'm hesitant to say that AI agents can code on their own. There always has to be a human in the loop. I'm confident. I don't know Now, I will say one day I might be proven wrong, but I don't know that an AI system without an engineer at its helm would ever be able to produce a product like what we've built in Agenda Keeper. There's just way too many wrinkles. There's way too much complexity for an AI system to figure out on its own without the guidance of a person. And so seeing how these tools have evolved and putting my hands on them again, I'm like, oh, these are amazing. And they're not necessarily good for building products, but they're fantastic for building prototypes and supporting a client that can see their idea take shape rapidly with just a few text prompts. Even like sitting down in the meeting and being like, okay, what do you want? Okay, and then feeding that right into the system and say, is this what you meant? Having that kind of instant feedback and instant learning is incredibly valuable. And we definitely leverage these tools with all of the clients that we serve because there is a place for them. They don't replace our engineers. They serve as a preempt to our engineering process. It's a way for us to validate and verify what we're designing and the system and its functionality. It helps us get clear on requirements. And any engineer that's in here, I know you all say, the better the requirements, the better the product. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. We're trying to continue to try to continue keeping up with these tools as they evolve so that we can make sure that we're serving both our process and its iteration and the needs of our clients and their vision. And the last piece here is connection. It's this idea of psychological safety. Something else that Deming would say is drive out fear. And the way that we drive out fear is we have to create environments where people feel safe. And what I'm finding with my team is that the more energy and the more communication and the more like effort and input I put into creating an environment where people feel safe to speak up or to disagree, the less fearful everyone is and the more productive our team becomes. Even just over the past year, we've had a couple hiccups. I mean, obviously the hurricane was a big challenge for us in the mountains. But like early in the spring, we're talking about our process and we're talking about refining it. And two of our engineers were like, I have an idea. And I was like, okay, well, that's why we're having this conversation. What's your idea? And they're like, well, I don't want to get in trouble for saying this. And I was like, you're going to get in trouble if you don't say it now. And so they speak up, and then it created this amazing dialogue in our team for the next 2 weeks, totally changed the way that we do things. And that never would have happened, and we wouldn't see all of these now benefits in the way that we operate as a team if they wouldn't have felt safe to speak up and disagree with the way that we were doing it at the time. So it's my job as a leader, and it's the job and it's the responsibility of management to create that sense of psychological safety. It's our job to make sure that we're reinforcing this message with our people that they're safe to disagree, that they're safe to have an idea, that they're safe in their job and in their role, and they're not going to lose it if they disagree or if they have an idea that might be controversial. That's how we iterate. That's how we learn. That's how we grow as a team. So some tools that I want to talk through because I want to try to give you guys some tangible stuff. I could talk about this all day or all night about Deming and his impact on me and my life and his principles of management and its impact on my team and our process and the way that we operate. But I feel like I need to, make it a little bit more accessible. So one of the easiest ways to start implementing some of what Deming talked about in his work is to listen. And I think that's hard for a lot of managers. And I've seen this in other organizations, especially larger organizations. The manager always wants to be the one who's talking the most. I think I don't know if any of you guys have seen this yet or not, but there's an AI note taker out there that now has a monologuing alert. And I was like, that's amazing. If there's like a person or manager or leader who's in the meeting who's monologuing too much, there's literally like a little sound that will ding and it'll be like, monologue alert. Like, do you want to snooze it or do you want to shift the topic or let someone else speak for a little while? But listening to your people, listening to your team. Like what I find in all of my one-on-ones with my team, and I meet with everyone on my team every couple weeks. And the first thing I ask is there anything blocking you? What is blocking you? What is that thing? And how can I help? What can I do to try to remove that barrier? What can I do to try to remove that blockage? And then I just listen. It's like ask a question and then just wait. And even if someone says, "Oh, I'm good," like nothing, then I'm like, "Okay," and I just wait. And they're like, "Well, actually," and there's almost always something that comes up. Whether that's a tool they're using that they don't love, that they'd like to try, this other tool that they put their hands on that they're really interested in, or if it's something personal, like as a manager, it's like obviously there are lines and there are barriers between personal and professional, but I find that the safer people feel, the easier it is for them to share what's going on in their lives. And the more context I have for what's happening in my team member's life, the easier it is for me to be supportive. And it's like, okay, what's a blocker? Well, I live with my mom and I need to move out. And I'm like, okay, how can I help? What do I do? Do you need a raise? Can we afford that? How do we figure that out? Do you need to work more? Can you work more? And it just immediately creates a dialogue for anything that comes up for that person. So listening to them, like ask the question and then just give them the floor. This is an important one. Focus on processes, not people. If you spend any time with Deming's writings in his books or online, you'll find a lot of emphasis on system and on systems theory and on the system of profound knowledge, understanding what motivates people, understanding a basic psychology of people, and how often when presented with a challenge, Deming would always point to the process. He would always point to the system and say, it's not the person's fault, it's the system's problem. There's almost always the answer is in the system. It's in the process. So as leaders, then it's our responsibility to continually renew the focus on the process. So sure, we maybe just went through that last quarter or 2 quarters ago, but that doesn't mean that the process is done. It's never done. It has to continuously improve. It has to continuously iterate and evolve. That's the only way process serves its people. If a process becomes stagnant, or if you look at your process documentation and nothing has changed, that's the problem, because there's no process to iterate your process. So always focus on the process. Don't necessarily focus on the people. Sometimes in a rare instance that there's a real problem person, so I'm not going to say that it's never the person, but 94% of problems are in the system. Feedback cycles that reward learning. I have a dear friend in Asheville who is all about celebrating failure and trying to change the narrative around like the negative, this whole concept of failure as an embarrassment or imposter syndrome or whatever that means, when really a failure is an epic learning experience. As a founder, he started a business, he ran it for 6 years, it failed. And when he says that, people are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." That's so unfortunate for you. And he immediately turns the table and he's like, "No, it was amazing. And I can't tell you how much I learned that I never would have learned had I not failed." And so creating a framework, whether that's a cycle or a process, or even just a reframing from a perspective of learning can come in lots of different shapes and sizes, and failure is definitely one of those. And having a process and a system that fails is not something to be embarrassed about. It's something to be celebrated, especially when you can clearly identify it. Like, oh, this is a problem. Yes, we have found something that we can now sink our teeth into collectively, and we can iterate together as a team and start learning about what we did wrong. Let's have a little retro. Let's talk about what didn't work. And now we can start iterating, and we can we can pick the bones out and figure out what worked and what didn't, and then be prepared for the next go round. Replace fear with trust. Now that's easy to say, and it's not necessarily easy to do. But I think, from my perspective, the more I've leaned into Deming's teachings and his philosophies, and how I'm doing my best to implement them with my team, the more I see this happen. So it's not necessarily like a specific focus that I have to, like, I don't like wake up and be like, okay, today I'm going to replace some fear with trust. It's not quite like that. It's more just, in many ways, that's kind of the outcome. That's part of what happens when you change your focus, when you reframe as a leader and as a manager, how you approach your team, what your focus is, what your responsibility is, how it's my responsibility to create an environment where people feel safe, where they can speak up, where they can have fun. I'm not like standing over their shoulder going, how many lines of code are you writing? Why are you going so slow? If they get up from their computer and they're sitting on the couch and they're having a conversation, that actually excites me because I know that they're brainstorming some solution. And then when they sit back down and they write the code, they're going to be way more productive because they're excited about what they're doing. So replacing the fear with trust comes from me. I have to trust them. I have to trust the team to do good work because I've created an environment where they can. And if they're not able to do good work, then they're going to say so. And they're going to say, hey, I can't do good work because the sun's in my eyes, I need a different desk. Or, hey, it's too hot, can we turn the air on? Whatever that is, the way that I replace the fear is by listening to them and trying to provide what they need so that they can do their best work. And I think the last piece here is celebrating craftsmanship and celebrating wins. This is another thing that I think a lot of businesses miss, similar to the retro and similar to like this idea of how do we learn, how do we identify failures, how do we learn from them? It's also how do we identify what we did well and how do we take some pride in that? And how do we celebrate that as a team? What can we do collectively to celebrate as a team? Because if people are doing good work and they're crushing it and they never feel like there's an opportunity to be like, yes, and like get a high five or go out for a beer or whatever it is, or go for a mountain bike ride or go for a hike, if they don't have that opportunity to celebrate their win, it's going to be harder for them to identify when they won. And so it's our responsibility as leaders and managers to help them celebrate their wins. Every time, every all hands meeting that I have, I'm giving kudos to at least one person, if not two or three. And in that space, I open the floor and I say, does anybody else have anything to celebrate? Any wins, any learnings, any failures, any kudos that they want to give to anybody else on the team? And almost every time, someone speaks up and they're like, oh man, Steve crushed it this week. I never would have been able to get unstuck if it wasn't for that meeting that we had on Tuesday. Rachel's design was incredible and it made my life so much easier when I got to that piece of functionality in the product. You know, people want to have an opportunity to feel like not only they're celebrating their own wins and their own work, but they're also able to celebrate what someone else on the team did. And sometimes that's hard. You know, it's like easier sometimes to say, well, that person did a great job, instead of being like, well, I did a good job. But the more that you create an environment for people to celebrate each other, the more they do. And I see that happen every week on my team. So the future of joy in the workplace, this is one that I've thought a lot about. AI and its impact. So AI amplifies our systems for the better or worse, for the good or bad. And if we have bad systems, then Lord help us. Because when we start superpowering those bad processes and bad systems with AI, they're just going to get so much worse. And so being mindful of where we plug AI in and how we leverage it, and whether or not we're doing it because we're trying to solve some sort of other problem. It's sort of like this, oh, we have a problem over here, let's just plug some AI in so we can go faster. If the process isn't under control and isn't well known, then in my mind, that's a terrible mistake. It's high risk for irreparable damage to your team and your process and your business. AI won't destroy joy in work. I've had people ask, like, well, what's AI's role in joy in work? And will it kill the joy? Will it kill joy in the work? And I don't think so. I think poor management kills joy in the work. I think more often than not, people who work for managers who don't understand any of this stuff and are operating under an old paradigm, they're the problem. You know, the approach to management and the approach to responsibility to the people that you manage is almost always the problem. So it's not the AI in the system that's causing us to lose our joy in our work. It's the manager's job. And more often than not, it's the management's responsibility for killing the joy in the work. And so our job, I think in IT especially, as like, you know, all of this news with like new data centers being built at quite a rapid clip, it's our job to ensure that the technology that we're creating amplifies our meaning, amplifies value, supports people in their problems. You know, like part of what I feel confident about in the product that we've built, Agenda Keeper, is that it actually helps solve a problem, and we don't use any AI to do it. Sure, our engineers are leveraging some AI tools to improve their workflows and their processes, but we're intentionally not putting AI on the product because we want meetings, and this whole concept of the Agenda Keeper in meetings, to still be revolving around the people. You know, like it's a human-centered product, it's a human-centered experience. Being in a meeting with a bunch of AI note takers is no fun for anybody. But being in a meeting with other people can be a lot of fun if it's managed well. So amplifying meaning and not just building technology for the sake of building technology, and not chasing metrics and not chasing things that don't actually directly connect to value and the experience of being in business or running a team or running a product or managing a product, whatever that looks like. And leadership and management must adapt to include joy. I think in the age of AI, even more so, this is incredibly important because the more that we have AI impacting the job market and replacing jobs and replacing junior roles and replacing a variety of roles in a variety of industries, it's even more critical that leadership and management are able to support their humans and the human element and the people that work in their teams by making sure that they're bringing joy to the table and they're doing everything that they can to make sure that joy is part of the equation. So a couple key takeaways, and then I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions because I know I've kind of been running through this a little bit quickly, but I feel like you guys have been with me, so I really appreciate the attention and all the head nodding. Systems create and govern behavior, so we have to fix systems first. There's like family systems and human design. There's lots of stuff out there in the world that talks about this. But it's the systems themselves that have the greater impact on our behaviors. So as a person, I might bring some stuff to the table, but if I'm operating in a system that's broken, then I'm always going to struggle. And so we have to focus on fixing systems first. And joy ultimately drives quality and productivity and performance. And I can say that confidently, 100% without a doubt, that people who are enjoying their work are exponentially more productive. And they're much happier in their work. And that creates a dynamic work environment where everyone is like, well, I mean, it's like that. There was a really interesting experiment that I saw where someone got on the subway and started laughing just to see what would happen. And within 10 seconds, everyone around them was laughing. No idea why. But there's just like, oh, something must be funny. Oh, hey, you know. So joy becomes like, what's that word? Infectious. Yes, it's almost like contagious. When you see one person having a lot of fun with what they're doing, you're like, oh, I want to hang out with that person. I want to work next to that person because they're having so much fun. And then all of a sudden, you've got 2 or 3 or 4 people who are collaborating and they're problem solving on their own, independent, with autonomy. They're solving problems that didn't need to have a meeting, that didn't have to be elevated to the product manager or to the client, because they were so in it and they were so productive that they figured out the source of the problem. They implemented a solution because they were having fun. So leadership really, in my mind, is almost all about removing barriers to joy. So whatever I can do as a leader and as a manager, it almost always comes back to, well, what's the problem? And is this impacting your ability to enjoy your work? Then this is a problem that I need to take seriously. So everything that I do as a leader comes back to this, to removing barriers to joy. And restoring pride in workmanship. You know, Deming talked early, like in the 50s and early 60s, he talked about the willing worker concept. And I'll talk a little bit about this now just as a wrap up. But he talked about the willing worker is the worker who takes pride in their work. So they have a sense of pride, they have a sense of fulfillment. And later in his life, he kind of switched. He swapped out pride for joy. He seemed to think that there's an interesting interview with him where he was like, pride's not quite it. It's really joy. And so willing workers, you know, like even if you Google willing worker Deming, it'll come up. Willing workers are a big part of what he was talking about. Motivated people, what motivates people? How do they find their own intrinsic sense of drive and their own intrinsic sense of motivation? It almost always comes back to this concept of pride and joy. Why do people do what they do? Why do people work a crappy job and they go home and work all night on the thing that they love? Because that's the thing that brings them joy. That's the thing that they could work 20 hours a day on and not feel like they worked for a minute, because it validates them. It's part of what drives them. So restoring pride in workmanship ties to this concept of leadership removing barriers to joy. It's like, I have to do my best to make sure that everyone that works on my team feels enabled to do their best work as a willing worker, as a motivated person, removing barriers to what they find fun and enjoyable so that they can show up and do their best work. And ultimately these four pieces of purpose and autonomy and growth and connection. And so I feel like when you provide people a sense of purpose, when you give them autonomy, when you let them have opportunities to grow and you give them a space where they can connect, they do. I run a business and I have a policy where it's you work when you want to, where you want to, how you want to, as often as you want to. And believe it or not, people come into the office because they want to. I don't have an RTO policy because I don't need one. You know, people come in sometimes 2 days a week, sometimes no days a week, sometimes 5 days a week. It all depends on what's happening. And that, to me, that flexibility and that autonomy has given my entire team a sense of purpose and a sense of connection that I never would have thought possible. Like I was like, you know, when I hired my first person, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this thing out. And I'm calling it the work when you want to, where you want to, how you want to kind of thing. If you work in the middle of the night, work in the middle of the night. If you work early in the morning, do that. If you want to work at home, that's great. If you want to come into the office, we'll make sure there's a desk there for you. And every single person that we've added to the team since then is like, sweet. And so the fact that they know that they have that autonomy and they understand how they connect and what their purpose is on the team, productivity is off the charts. It's kind of crazy. With a small team, we're kind of crushing it. So that's really all I have for you guys. Do you have any questions? Thank you. Yes, in the back. Yeah, that's a great question. People ask that all the time. My professor worked, obviously, as a professor teaching organizational leadership and teaching Deming's principles, but he also worked kind of moonlighting as a consultant. And large organizations would hire him, and they would ask that same question. Hey, in a large distributed team, or we've got a team of 5,000, how do we implement something like this? How do we get the teams to collaborate? How do we get this process in place? And the answer is not always easy, and it's not like a one size fits all, because it all depends on it's funny because my professor used to say this all the time. Nothing can change if leadership doesn't want it to. And so always the first question that he would ask when he was hired as a consultant is, how willing are you to change the way you do things? And so if there's no willingness to change, then there's probably not going to be a lot of opportunities to implement this kind of approach, regardless of the size of the business. I think there are lots of creative ways to create this kind of structure in a large business. I have lots of arguments, well, not arguments, I'd say spirited debates with friends that work and have come from large organizations or small organizations that were acquired by large organizations, and how challenging culture can be in those transitions. And oh, now we're in our own little bubble and we're a team of 50, but we're inside of an organization that's 5,000 or 10,000 people. And how do we not lose this magic and this culture that we've cultivated in this behemoth of an organization? And the answer is the only way to preserve that is if you have the support and engagement and involvement of leadership. They have to be the ones that start the process, because if leaders don't want to change or they don't see the value in this, it doesn't matter who tries to implement it within their organization or within their team. It's always going to die on the vine. It has to start from the root. It has to start, I don't like thinking of organizations as a top-down structure. I try to think of ours as a bottom-up. But it has to start there. If you get buy-in from leadership, then there's nothing you can't do. There's lots of ways to create opportunities of overlap. There's lots of ways to create opportunity for people to change roles if they're not happy. But it has to be a unified message. So I think the question of how do you do this in larger organizations is lots of ways. And there's not one easy answer that's like, oh, well, this is how you do it, because it all depends on the industry, it all depends on the structure, it all depends on how many departments and how many managers and how many layers do we have to accommodate. And there's always a solution. There's always a way to create an environment where this model can flourish. So I think that it's a great question, and one that I love talking about with people who work at big organizations, because it means that there's real interest. And when there's interest, there's possibility. And so I think kind of a non-answer, but I feel like maybe I addressed it, I hope. Yeah, they do all want to work that way, and they all do. And so we have an HR team. We've got a sales. I kind of lead the sales side of things, and we have a marketing team and marketing department, and all of our teams operate this way. So I talk about this more from a technology perspective, mostly because I was trying to frame this from like, how does this apply to IT and engineering and information technology as a service, or ERP systems, or data architecture and infrastructure. But it works on all teams for sure. And everyone that works with us, either as a contractor or as a W-2 employee, everyone constantly is commenting on like, wow, this is really great. Like every time we hire someone new, they almost always say, is this really how it works here? Like, is this for real? And it's always like, yeah, this is how we do it. And if you don't like it, just say so, and then we can talk about it. So yeah, there's lots of ways to implement this kind of structure organization-wide. Nonprofit organizations are great case studies for this. Large membership organizations are great case studies for this, but large corporate enterprises, I think, are the greatest need, because they're the ones that usually have the least amount of this going on already. Other questions? I think we have time for a couple more, maybe? A couple few? Anyone? Yes, sir. Oh my, just define systems. So anything that has an input and an output, whether that's a human system, or if it's automated system, or if it's, there's lots of other types of systems, but it's anything that has an input and an output. So thinking about systems in the way that Deming spent most of his career thinking about them, they were manufacturing systems. It was like, okay, there's a raw material that comes in, and there's a car that goes out. And there's all these mini systems that all interact with each other. It's almost like you've got a microservices product, and you've got all these layers of API, and like, okay, this one system kind of has its own operation internally, and then it communicates with another system, and all of that is part of a larger system. So it's kind of like the onion, it's like Deming. I think there's a diagram in one of his books where it talks about the system of the person. So a system could be an individual, and what are they showing up with? What's going on within them? Are they happy, sad, mad, glad? What is their emotional state? What's their psychological state? That's one part of a larger system. A team of people, that's a system. That team of people could be in a larger organization, and that's a larger system. And then that organization could be part of a local community of businesses, and that's a larger system. And then that larger community is part of a city, and that's a larger system. That city is part of a county, part of a state, part of a country. So it's systems within systems. It's very much this nesting doll kind of model that Deming talked about a lot. And when you can break everything down to its individual components within the system and identify where those smaller systems live within larger systems, that's when you can start to see kind of the magic of a systems approach to governance. Does that make sense? Awesome. Yes, sir.
Kind of related, I mean, it's follow up, but I've heard people use the term process or policy or governing standards, like that can be part of the system or part of the problem. Like, I'm just trying to understand, because I've heard people use the phrase process, like it's not the people, it's the process that you're forcing them through that's stifling innovation.
Yeah, that's fair. So then the question is,
Well, I just making sure that terminology wise, whether
It's-
you say system, someone else might say process.
Right, gotcha.
Process
I see.
improvement,
mhm.
like defining, well, what's the core problem? What are we trying to fix?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so process and system can be interchangeable for sure. And there can be processes that live within larger systems, and that can be a process within a larger system. So process, policy, system, I think those are all fair to interchange. Yes, ma'am.
I guess in clarification, as you talk about joy, so you find it as removing the barriers from work, right? Autonomy, purpose, growth, connection,
Mm-hmm.
in relation to work. So I know some companies went kind of a way of like, oh, we have free lunches and we have baristas and,
Mhm.
and trying to make the workplace generally a more joyful kind of place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Would that tie into what the discussion is here, or is that kind of separate because it's not directly impacting work, but like setting or just trying to?
That's a great question. I think it definitely plays a part. I think because part of the experience of enjoying your work can revolve a lot around your environment. Like, do I have to bring my food, or is my food provided? Is it good food, or do I hate the food? Kind of those questions. But I think you kind of point out something that I actually need to refine my presentation around, because I think joy really is it's down to the individual. So it's like, what for you as a worker, what brings you joy? What part of your work do you enjoy the most? And if you can't say, or if you don't know, then that's like a massive red flag. And it's like, okay, well, we gotta figure this out. Like, why are you doing what you're doing here if you don't enjoy it? And so to ask, like, the definition of joy to me relates more to the person. So like the individual on the team. Because I mean, if we're talking about joy, we're talking about like an experience. It's an emotion. It's like it's a sense of fulfillment. It's a sense of pride. It's a happy emotion. For those of you who have been through therapy and you know the emotion wheel. And so joy, I think, is part of that. It's like excitement, it's fulfillment, it's pride, but all of that is within the individual. And so when we're talking about bringing joy back to the workplace, we're not thinking about bringing it back en masse. We're thinking about bringing joy back to each person, like you specifically, individually. What do you do? What do you enjoy? Are you doing what you enjoy? And if you're not, then it's my job to fix that and to make sure that you have an opportunity to do work that you enjoy. Does that make sense? Awesome. Yes, Jerome.
Just a follow up.
Sure.
I'm gonna say it, and as soon as I say it, I'm gonna but like some people feel like, especially as engineering mindsets, that they have to like measure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting off at this place. I'm right now here.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to implement some changes, run a test, and in a month, we want to know if we've made an improvement. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So metrics, how do you measure it? But even measuring stuff, doing surveys, feedback, could bring some people some non-joy. But
That's fair. Not everyone loves a survey. I get that. Okay.
But like, how do you gauge your success as a manager? Are you just talking with them? Are you doing surveys? Are you like doing metrics to say, hey, we did 3 things, 2 of them worked well, this other one's not. We're going to stop that. Like, I'm just curious, like, when you've implemented things, how do you know that it's getting better?
I'll say the easy answer is that it's obvious, like for everyone, including me. Like when I walk into the office, it's like if we're having a bad day, everybody knows. We're not tracking specific metrics. I could see a system that could be created to track certain elements of, how successful are we, how productive are we, those kinds of things. But I feel like that starts to tiptoe into some dangerous waters. One of the things that Deming was really a huge opponent of is this concept of, oh gosh, the word just jumped out of my head. What is it when you have a quota? So there's lots of examples in his books about how quotas are the easiest and fastest way to kill innovation and kill productivity.
Like SLA?
The service level agreements, that's fair. Right. Well, I mean, that's a good question because that might be a weird wrinkle. It's like, responsiveness is maybe a good thing, and do we respond in time? But I think it's more this idea of we have to sell $1 million by tomorrow, and having these quotas. There's a great example that Deming talked about and my professor talked about a lot. There was a manufacturing business that leadership was like, we're not producing enough, we're not going fast enough, so we need a quota. Let's create a quota system because we have to hit these things and then we'll do well. So they created a quota system. All of the workers on the floor hated it, and ultimately led to a profound innovation that the workers kept to themselves and never shared with their leadership. They were able to figure out a way to modify their process to produce 10 times the amount that the quota required, and they refused to share it with their leadership because they had a quota, and all they had to do was hit that quota. And as soon as they had a really great idea and it had a massive impact on their productivity, they're like, I'm not going to share this because then our quota is going to go up. So why would I share that? So the easiest way to stifle innovation and to kill joy is to create a target. And I know that that's like, there's some targets that are good, but quotas are really dangerous territory. And there's lots of ways that you can have massive negative and detrimental impacts on your team when you create these gates and these targets. It's a long and ongoing discussion, but that was one thing that Deming was adamant. He was very much against, because then you create a limit on the system's potential. If you don't create a quota and you don't create a target, then the system could infinitely scale. And as soon as you put a cap on it, then you prevent it from ever realizing those potential additional gains, if that makes sense. Fascinating concept. Yes. Yeah.
All of a sudden you have like a ton of line of code.
And it's garbage. Yes, exactly. So it's like, gotta be really careful with the metrics that we listen to and that we follow that guide our decisions. I think the best metrics for this are the intangibles. Are when I have a one-on-one with my team member, I know right away if this is working for them or not. I know right away if there's something on their mind that they're struggling with or not. It's really obvious because they're not scared to say, if that makes sense. Yes, sir.
But then another point that's kind of what it's built on was the CSI continuous service improvement.
Yep.
And if you set that target, they're not looking to pass that.
Right.
That 1% better, 1% better.
Yep.
And once you reach that target.
Right. Then any effort that would be required to go beyond that, no one's going to put in. But if the whole system is created on a continuous iterative model, then there's no limit, there's no cap, there's no quota. Yes, sir.
Related to what you're just talking about.
Sure.
I come from the sales side.
Yeah.
I think if there's an incentive to go beyond
Okay.
But what I see on the sales side is what we call the success tax.
Okay.
That's where your quota goes up the next year.
Yep.
So
Very
it's
true.
not related to what you're talking about.
No, it is. Yeah, for sure.
If you exceed it, it can go up.
Yep.
As a minimum. But if there's incentives to exceed quota, whatever the mark is, then that's where I can kind of maybe be offset because sometimes you want to have a minimum standard in order to make numbers work or what have you.
Right. That's fair. I think that's a valid point, and I've definitely heard about the success tax before as well. They're like, man, I crushed it this quarter, and then they just raised my target. Like, shoot, and now I'm not going to get my bonus.
Well, I know like myself, I've only had 2 sales jobs in 26 years.
Okay. All right.
But if you wonder why salespeople, if you're here on the operations side, if you wonder why salespeople often say jobs every 3 to 5 years. Year 1, you're getting started. Year 2, you have some success. Year 3, you blow it out. Year 4, your quota doubles.
Right, and then you leave.
If you ever wondered why salespeople often switch every 3 or 4 years,
That's why.
one of the main.
Wow.
I was just dumb enough not to leave, I guess.
Yeah. That's fair. Maybe one more. Awesome. Yeah, there you go.
I
We've
don't really do it as a job.
nice. That's great. That's what we want. I've got time for one more question. If there's one more quick question, and if not, we can call it there. No, awesome. Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Shane.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
A token of our appreciation.
Oh wow,
Put it on your
Sweet.
mantle.
Oh,
Good time of year
what?
to put things on the mantle.
I got a plaque. Yay! Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. We can stay in Ninkle for a little while longer, probably another 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. And we'll see you all in December. Don't forget you can register tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. How'd we do on time?
I'll email it. Perfect.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, because with Q&A and stuff.
Thank you.
I'll
Yeah.
text a picture, so I'll email it to you.
Perfect.